Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Widow podcast. Today I am so excited and so honoured to have the wonderful Gary Andrews here, aka Gary Scribbler, Gary Doodle, however you want to name him. I'm sure you follow him. He's huge on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I don't think you've quite navigated TikTok yet, have you, Gary? Is that?
I don't dance enough to do TikTok.
Not quite on TikTok yet, but Gary is amazing and is very well known in the grief space. So I've invited him on to talk about his journey through widowhood and the loss of his wife Joy and his journey thereafter, because it truly is just so incredibly inspiring. Over the years of listening to Gary talk on other podcasts and shows, I've drawn so much strength and wisdom from him that I hope you'll be able to do the same today from our conversation. So Gary, hello and welcome.
I'm glad this is only audio and not visual, because I'm blushing now. That's lovely. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sure you've heard it all before, Gary. You're an inspiration to so many.
Very kind.
Oh, so let's start. Let's start with your story of your lovely wife Joy, and what happened and when it happened. If you're happy to share that with us.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we'd been together since 1998. We met at a local theatre. I'd met her years before, actually, but she went away to uni and came back and blah, blah, blah. We became best friends, and then suddenly one day realised we'd fallen in love, and we had 19 incredible years together, 2 beautiful children. And then in October 2017, to cut a long story short, out of the blue, very quickly, she developed sepsis and was gone in a flash. And it was one of those crazy moments when your world just sort of turns 180 degrees overnight. I was away on business when she was taken ill. I had to try and fly home early, but by the time I'd landed, she died. So the whole thing was, pretty traumatic and surreal. I think that's probably the best way to describe it.
I can't even begin to imagine that plane ride home for you. It just must have been horrendous, knowing that she was, obviously you didn't know she was going to die.
I didn't know she was dying. I knew she wasn't at all well. And in my head, I was thinking, oh, well, maybe I'm going to have to look after the kids for a couple of weeks while she's in hospital. It might take a bit long, might be a long recovery. Who knows what's going on? Because they didn't know what was wrong with her. That was the thing. She wasn't presenting classically with sepsis, and they just knew something was wrong. And could I get home quickly? So that flight, for the first time ever, actually, I slept on a flight. I normally don't, but actually, I was so stressed that I slept. It's a hard one to sort of put my head around, but I did. But everything went through my head, all the scenarios, including the worst case scenario, which she comes in and then goes away. You just think, that one. Yeah. And then when I landed and her mum and brother were there to meet me rather than my bus, which I had booked, the little alarm bells rang, and then when we got back to the car before we drove off, they told me that she died at 3:15 that morning, which was basically just before I got on the plane in Vancouver. Wow. So she'd actually died just before I took off, but I didn't know. So it was it was kind of midday-ish, just after midday UK time when I got home, when I landed. And then I had the 1 hour drive from Heathrow to home to sort of prepare myself to be able to tell the kids, because they'd managed to keep it from them. They knew she was in hospital, but they'd managed to keep from them what had happened. So they knew I would want to tell them. So that was a kind of very strange, very surreal. I can still remember every single moment of it. It was one of those things that burns into your mind forever, that sort of time. A lot of things fade away and become all blurred, but I have such clear memories of that whole process. Yeah, those things stick with you, don't they?
Yeah, they do. They're not moments you ever envisage yourself in.
No. And, I'd lost both my parents by the time I was 31, I think. My parents died when I was like 28 and 31. So I'd been through losing somebody close to me before. So the practical kind of mundane side of it was in the storage in my head. I kind of knew how to cope with all that stuff on sort of autopilot, and that was kind of useful, I guess, in a way. But emotionally, it's such a different feeling to lose a partner, because you expect to lose your parents at some point. I'd have liked to have them around a bit longer.
Yeah, you were young.
But it was still the right way round.
Yes.
you know, but to lose your partner, especially one that was 15 years younger than me, I mean,
Yes.
I was quite lucky. You know, that was just totally, it wasn't even on our radar. You know, we'd always planned for when I go.
Yes. Yeah, natural course of events. Yeah. It's I often talk in my groups and with, you know, the coaching that I do, that I believe, and I say this just from obviously talking to other widows and widowers and being in grief groups myself. I mean, the only significant loss I've experienced in my life is my husband. I'm very, very lucky. I still have my parents here. You know, I've lost grandparents, but like you say, natural course of events. But I think for me, my belief is that, you know, when you lose a life partner, and probably the same for a child as well, but I haven't, that it impacts every corner of your universe. Whereas when you have another loss, and I'm not saying that one's greater than the other, it's just a difference in it. But when you have another loss, you have something normal to come back to. You have an element of your life, a stability, I suppose, in that.
Yeah, like I say, it's no less painful and tragic and sad to lose a parent. We're all going to do it, you know, pretty much most of us, sort of thing. And you know it's going to happen. So when it happens, it's something you've been sort of preparing for, even subconsciously, I think.
Yeah.
It's no less painful. And you know, and losing a parent when you're young, and I mean, I think about my children losing Joy very young.
Yeah.
Obviously, it impacts hugely. It's just, it's different. And it's not like, yeah, my grief's better than your grief kind of thing at all. It's just very different. You're absolutely right. It touches different areas of your soul, of your heart, whatever you want to call it. And that's that was one of the things that sort of struck me quite hard when it happened, you know, just that when my parents died, I was really sad. I really missed them, but I didn't have that same emptiness that I had when Joy died. There was because I'd chosen her.
Yes.
You know, your parents are there and you accept them and you love them because they're part of your life and always have been.
Yes.
And there's that huge loss when they go. But to have chosen someone to be part of this shared experience and then for that to be taken away, it's a different sort of pain.
Yes. Yeah, that's so true. You know, that's so true. I'd kind of hadn't thought of it in that way, you know, but you choose these people to be in your life, don't you? And that's huge. So did you go and get to see Joy after she died?
No, I made a choice not to, and I'll tell you for why. When Mum and Dad died, both of them had been in some kind of discomfort, pain, whatever. And the last time I saw both of them alive, they were uncomfortable, they were hurting, they didn't look well. Yeah. And when they died, I went to see them, like I saw both of them very shortly. I missed both of them dying. I mean, I've missed everybody dying. I've not been there. I had to go home to get Mum's overnight stuff, and then Dad died. And I'd been with Mum all night, and I went home to have a little sleep, and then she died. And it was just like that. But I went back and saw them both straight away, and I saw them in the undertakers afterwards. And the great thing about that was they went from being in pain to being at peace. Wow. And that felt important to me to see. Now, the last time I saw Joy was on a FaceTime, and we were laughing and smiling. Although she felt fluey, which is what we thought it was, we were laughing and smiling, and the last thing we said was, I love you. And that was the memory I had. I didn't want to have that memory taken away. So I made a choice not to. Yes. And I said to the children that I'm not going to, do you want, and they decided not to as well, which was fine. I think, you know, they made their choice. We did have the undertakers were amazing, and we all got a lock of her hair plaited with a purple ribbon, which we've all got hanging up in our bedrooms. And they took fingerprints, which we had put in silver little casts and stuff, which we've got as key rings and necklaces and things. So there were those tangible things, and we had, obviously with the ashes and stuff like that, but also had some of the ashes put into a paperweight, which we have on the landing, which we pass every day. So there are tangible memories of her around. But yeah, no, we chose not to go and visit because the last memories have been, you know, certainly for me. And I think although they saw her go off in an ambulance, she wasn't at that point in extreme pain. She was they just took her in, you know. So I just felt with everything they were going through, it's probably best for them at that point to accept it a different way. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, our children they are guided by us, aren't they, in what we do. But I think it's lovely that you gave them that choice, actually, because it's one thing I really struggled with after Simon died was, what do I do? Do I
ask them? Do I take them? Do they, you know, to see him, to go to the funeral? There's all these questions, isn't there? And just was sat chatting to him one day after he died. You know, I was doing the chatting.
Like you do. Yeah.
And it just came to me. It was almost like a message from him. Ask them what they want to do. And so I did. But it's really hard, I think, as a parent in that situation to know what choices to make as to what feels right for them.
It is. And I mean, one of the things I've done from day one with my kids, with most decisions that are kind of important decisions, whatever, is I've just included them in it from the start. I've asked them, we've been part of the process from the moment she died, and from the moment I told them, I said to them, this is going to change now. It's not mum and dad and you guys, it's us three. We've got to be a team. And although I'm the team captain, you know, we've got to work together in this, and I'm going to cry, you're going to cry, I'm not going to hide it, please don't you hide it. Let's just be in this together. And that came to all decisions like that as well. So I just decided on the spot, without really thinking about it, that I'll just include them.
It's funny, isn't it, those instincts that drive us, that we just know. And what I think I've loved about listening to you and your journey along the way is that you've always just allowed your instincts to guide you. You've just done what has felt natural and right, and you've not questioned. It appears that way, Gary. You've not questioned yourself or thought, well, they didn't do this, I'd better not do it.
I mean, sometimes one questions one's decisions after you make them, go, did I do the right thing, do the wrong thing? You're always going, am I crap? Am I any good? Am I doing this right? But it seems to work so far. And sort of ironically, considering that I've actually published a book, I didn't look at any books about it. I mean, people offered me books, and I gave me a couple, and I think there was one I read which was almost more like a novel than a self-helpy kind of one. But I kind of chose not to because I was just following as you say, the instinctive path, and I just felt, I'm not sure I really want to be told, which is, you know, ironic seeing as how I brought one out. But my book isn't a sort of this is how to. This is a more like this is what happened book, rather than a how to. I think it's slightly different, but I just decided to just follow my gut the whole time, which is kind of how I've lived my whole life. I mean, I don't. I'm terrible. I never look. I always make stuff up.
But that I was going to say to you, is that how you've always been? But obviously, that's kind of who you are at your core, and that's served you well, actually.
Yeah, I kind of wing it. I've been winging it for 61 years now, and you know,
done all right.
I've done okay. So I kind of, I mean, you know, obviously when, you know, occasionally, I remember when the kids were born, you know, reading a bit of Miriam Stoppard or whatever, you know, just to sort of say, mainly to find out where to stick thermometers and you know, what does that rash mean, but never the kind of what to do with them as people, more like the practical stuff, obviously, was useful, but you know, I've always kind of just
did that help your support net? Because I know you have a huge support network. You have wonderful friends around you, and you know how they all pull together and they set up support groups for you, didn't they? Where they all
WhatsApp group where they talk about me, not to me.
And they just were there. And I listened to one story about a friend of yours. I think he'd come to your house and he didn't know what to say, and he gave you a hug, and you both ended up laughing because he was like, I don't actually know what to say to you.
Yeah, that was literally she died on the Friday, and that was on the Monday. His wife had come around literally the afternoon on the Friday and seen me, but he was on shift and he couldn't see me all weekend. So he came on the Monday, and he gave me a hug, and we just started laughing. He said, it's ridiculous. And we just started laughing. And it was quite because it was just such a raw emotion. Yeah, it was. And then later on in the evening, there was crying. But then that was great because they held me while I had a little cry and stuff. And it was one of my first big releases, actually. But it came after the laughter, which was interesting. I think that let something out, you know.
100%. I think there's definitely a place for it. I
mean, laughter has been huge. It was huge in our relationship, and it has been huge through my grief process as well. Laughter has been very healing and also very important. It took a while for me to get used to the idea, but once I got used to it, actually it became really important. And having funny children helps as well. I mean, they're ridiculous. And they made me laugh a lot, you know, early on. They have this incredible power of bouncing back and living in the moment and not holding on to the same sort of things we hold on to as adults, with the guilt about feeling happy, which is what I was feeling.
Yes.
And they can be happy in a moment and then sad the next. And that was quite a nice sort of observation to go, I just to be like that. And
God, they can guide us, can't they, so well.
Completely, 100%. I've told the story a million times, and apologies to anyone who's heard this before, but the thing that actually I think was the mantra, if you like, for my whole process started 20 minutes after I told them she died, when we stopped crying, and the next thing they asked me was, what's for tea? and what's for tea, I think is kind of, if my wife hadn't been called Joy, and the book obviously had to be called Finding Joy, I think the second title would have been What's for Tea, because that sort of put everything into perspective when they asked that. And it's, oh my God, yeah, we do have, we have to keep moving, that these things have to happen, and I had to feed them and keep them alive and warm, and so they led from the first moment, really.
Which I think is brilliant, and I mean, there's lots of models of grief out there, but the one I think I resonate the most with is, I don't know, you probably haven't heard of it because you haven't read a lot about grief. There's Strobe and Spurt, or I can't remember the other guy's name. It's awful, isn't it? But it's the kind of the loss orientation, and then the restoration side of it as well, and you oscillate between the two. It's like a push-pull effect between being in your grief and then being in the restorative phase, creating your new normal, finding your way forward, and allowing space for both, which I think kids do beautifully. And I know they refer to it as puddle jumping, don't they? 1 minute you're kind of like jumping in the puddles of grief, and then they're out of it and they're running around, they're laughing, and they're like asking what's for tea, and and it's like, oh God, hang on a minute, I can't keep up.
It was quite, yes, at the beginning they're sort of going at this breakneck pace of life, and you're still there trying to sort of process, because that's what we do as adults. And it did teach me a lot about being in the moment and surrendering to the moment. And so as much as I sort of led them as dad, they've certainly led me in that way as well.
How did you find your peace with that though, Gary? How did you kind of allow yourself those moments? You said the guilt. How did you work through that?
Well, I mean, there was those early on days, I'm sure you remember this, when you have that first day when you're not crying all day, and suddenly you find yourself laughing with a friend or doing something, and you suddenly realize you haven't thought about it for 10 minutes, and you're laughing, and then suddenly you go, I was happy, and then you feel horribly guilty, and then you beat yourself up. And I remember sitting there thinking, she wouldn't want me to feel guilty for being happy. Our whole life was about enjoying ourselves and having fun, and it was kind of knowing that she'd be standing beside me going, what the are you, sorry, I know we mustn't swear on we mustn't swear on here, I'll be good, I should self bleep, and what are you up to, stop it, and having that moment, and then making actually quite a conscious decision to, I mean, I've called it, I don't know if, I'm sure it's out there already, but I called it positive grieving, where I decided that, so this, I had 19 brilliant years. Yeah. And I looked around me at people I know who aren't happy in their present with partners. And I think, oh my goodness, I was so lucky to have what I had. I'm going to celebrate that rather than be miserable about poor me. Yeah. And then what I became was, the sadness was for what she was missing rather than for the fact that I didn't have her there, because I couldn't do anything about that. Realistically, and I'm quite a realistic person and a pragmatic person, I was like, well, I can't undo what's happened. Yeah. Therefore, there's no point in going, oh, if only. But what I could do is go, oh, what a shame she's not sharing this. She would have loved this. Yes. But look what we did have. And that sort of realization and made myself think that way, really. And that was a big change for me. Yeah. And we still, I mean, all the time talk about, there's not a day goes by we don't talk about her still. And there's always that kind of, oh, mum would love this, wouldn't she? Can you imagine if she was here now, what she'd be doing? And we put her into our situations still now, in that kind of way, acknowledging the fact that she has died, that she's not there. But, oh, what if she was? She'd be doing this, wouldn't she? And that's, I think, very positive as well.
Definitely it is, and it's so important, I think, to really sort of, you know, create that awareness around your thoughts and what you're doing to yourself, because we can layer our grief with so much suffering, can't we, with the thoughts and the what ifs and I should have and I
I mean, it's
shouldn't
very
be.
easy to sit here 4.5 years later and say this. I remember at the time, in those first few weeks, just being, you know, absolutely devastated and sitting there just in front of the TV with it on and haven't got a clue what was on because it was so blurred from the tears, and just crying myself to sleep. I mean, I remember that very clearly, but I also remember the other thoughts coming through quite early on, and doing the doodling for me helped that, because it catalogued for me the journey and the process, and if there was a good one, I could do it. And I clung to those little moments of positivity in there and put them down to remember when I was feeling down that there were positives, and also to remember the you know, the downs in the dip as well, being honest with myself, so that I could look back a month after to the first month's worth of drawings, go, okay, you've come this far. And it was my own self-counseling, you know, sort of to do that. And you know, even now I could look back at them, and my children still, you know, especially my daughter, will go to the old books and get them off the shelf and flick through them and look back at them, and it's been very useful doing that, you know, and charting that journey.
I can imagine it's a very cathartic, healing tool for you in your journey, because you started the doodle diaries before Joy died, didn't you?
Yeah, about 1.5 years. Yeah.
Yes, and then
it was an art-based thing. I needed to wanted the practice of drawing, and I just thought, well, a diary is the best way to make me draw every day. Yeah. So that was why it started. Yeah.
And then obviously the day she died, you did the broken heart.
Yeah.
And that was, did you make a conscious decision then to continue doing it through your journey, or was it more just, I'm just going to do this for now?
By the time it had reached that point, I did 1.5 years in, it had become part of my process. It was what I do at night before I go to bed. It's kind of difficult to go to bed not having done it. I feel like something's missing. So it already felt that way. So when she died, and I carried the drawings on because it was just what I do. And I started to realize what they'd become for me. And kept doing them. I thought, well, this is very useful and healthy for me, still good for the drawing, but also good for me, you know, spiritually and whatever. So I kept it up, you know, because of that. I think I probably would have still been drawing it anyway if she was alive, but they'd have been different, you know. There'd have been more, you know. One of the and what happened was, as you know, as they started taking off and they got noticed, and the social media thing went nuts, I made a conscious decision, that obviously keep it honest and true, and never make anything up, never play to the crowd, just put my personal feelings on that day, blah, 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 blah. But the only censorship I gave myself was no politics, no religion. I didn't, because I'd realized that the people that followed were right across the board, that there was the range of people that followed from left, right, you know, there was no one type. Yeah. And I thought, if I start putting things that alienate people, that's not what this is about anymore. No. You know, in the old days there were a couple of political jokes or whatever that I put in, and things happened, you couldn't help it. But I decided from day one, pretty much, they're gone. This is about feelings, not about being clever. Yes. So, and that's been the only self-censorship I've done for the whole thing, and that will now stay until the end of time, until I'm going to keep going till I go out of my box. So I'm yeah, that's the only thing. It's like, it's not about that, it's about feelings, it's about life, it's about all that. So yeah.
And it's so wonderful, and I love that your daughter goes, you know, what a wonderful thing for her to be able to go and reflect on and share with you and remember and talk about. I mean, that in itself is a gift, isn't it?
It's fun, and you know, we've got photo albums and things which you can look at, but a lot of these are about feelings and emotions, and that's something you can't photograph, but you can put it in a picture, and that's quite nice to talk about those memories and those feelings, which is good. And a lot of people have said, won't it be a lovely thing, you know, when I'm gone, that they'll have that to look back on and to show their children, and that is quite a nice feeling. You know, I hope they do.
It will, and I think you know, that's funny, because it's just one picture with a few little words on, but it speaks 1,000 words sometimes, doesn't it? It kind of, you can just really resonate sometimes with the way you've drawn the picture. You know, I love the way you have Joy in a lot of them in the background, and it faintly drawn. You know, that's just like, wow. And then you've got the grief, what do you call him? The
grief demon.
The grief demon, that's it.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes he's kind of wrapped around you and suffocating you, and other times he's kind of just back.
He's over in the corner now. He's over in the corner, sitting there behaving himself. And basically I'm in charge, and occasionally I can let him in.
Yes.
You know? And just once in a blue moon, he'll try and scare me, jump out, boom, you know, go, oh, I didn't see you coming. You, But mostly he's just sort of like a slightly unwelcome visitor in the house somewhere now, rather than this sort of human, you know, this rucksack on your back, clutching your organs, which is what he was at the beginning.
And do you feel that now? Do you feel a sense of freedom from the grief almost? That it's more on your terms? It's there. It hasn't. Yeah. What does it look like for you now?
I think it was sometime in late in year 3, I think it was, that I realized that the balance of power had shifted. Year 1 is raw, is pain. Everything is new for the first time. Then you get through that first anniversary, and then you hit year 2. And what I discovered in year 2 was it was even slightly more painful in a way, not on a day-to-day basis, but on those moments when you go, oh, it's another one. Yeah. And you realize this is forever, not just the once.
Yes.
And that second year was actually quite tough on those days. Overall, it wasn't so bad, but on those days it heightened it. By the time you get to year 3, it was a bit like, okay, here we go again. An old hand, you know, you go, right, I'm expecting this now. And they didn't hurt the same way. And that's when I think the balance shifted, and I was like, okay, I see what's happened here. I'm now the alpha in the relationship between me and the grief demon. And as time's gone on and as more things have happened in life, he's been pushed further into the corner, into the next room, whatever. As I say, we'll still occasionally put the bucket of water over the door, you know, to take you by surprise. But most of the time, and I can, if I want, if I'm feeling it, sometimes I can sit there and go, wait, come on then, in you come, and have a little moment, because sometimes you need them.
100%.
And even now, you know, even now when some really good things happen, sometimes you just want to invite him back in to go, give you a little perspective, and almost weirdly, almost to share it with the grief demon, and sharing it with joy, if you like, that thing of, look, a really good thing's happened. I'm going to share this with you, and that's going to be a bit painful. I'm going to have a little cry, but it's good tears. I know you'll get it. And then when I'm done, I can go, right, see you next time. And it's kind of got like that now.
Yeah, and I think you're right, it definitely evolves and changes, and you can't see it at the beginning. You don't see that you're ever going to come out of it, do you? It feels permanent and suffocating. No. And
I know I've been talking about year 1, year 2 with you, and I'm incredibly aware that for every single person the time scale is different.
Absolutely.
That could be month 1, month 2, month 3 with some people. It could be decade 1, decade 2 for other people. There's no right or wrong. I'm just saying where it was for me,
for you,
and where it's at for me. And I have a few close friends who are on a similar pattern, who lost people around about the same time as me, whom we've naturally gravitated into a little sort of informal but rather wonderful little tribe. And a lot of them are in a similar place, but not everyone. There are others that are nowhere near. And others that, you know, it's all different. And
it is,
you know,
we all do it very differently for different reasons, don't we? You know, we all have a different support network, a different outlook. You know,
totally. I mean, my analogy is like a forest, and you know, you go into the forest at the grief at the beginning, and the other side is that it thins out and there's the clearing. So we're all trying to make our way through, but we're all taking a different path. Some of us find a nice path that we can wander along, and it's quite easy. A few little brambles on the way. Other people wander into some sort of thicket of nettles and can't get out for ages, but eventually do. So we're all passing through that forest, just choosing different ways. And
absolutely. I think that's so true. I think that's a lovely analogy of it. And I think, you know, after we lose a loved one, for me, I've really kind of believed in that idea of sort of finding meaning. I guess making sense of the loss, and that's not finding a reason for it. That's not kind of going, it's okay and I get it, but what you do with your life that kind of honors your person, that kind of, like I say, brings meaning. How do you feel you've done that with Joy?
Well, with Joy's death, because it was sepsis, and you know, when that happened, and when we realized it was that, and I looked into that and realized just what a killer that is and how unrecognized it is, I've tried to do what I can to sort of raise sepsis awareness and things like that. And that's one of the ways I've sort of done it. And every time I've posted about it, I get messages from people saying, if we hadn't seen your post, we wouldn't have known to call the ambulance, and we've saved so-and-so's life. So
Wow.
this gets me emotional, sorry. And it makes me realize that there are people out there now alive who wouldn't be if she hadn't died.
Wow.
And that, for me, makes her death less pointless. And that's that's part of her legacy now for me. I think that's one of the things. The other thing is, through the social media side, through the drawings, and her very much being part of that, and her name being tied with the book, and people who followed the journey, who it's helped them realize they're not alone. And people who say to me, I every morning I go to your pictures and it just makes my day, makes my day better, or whatever, stuff like that. That as well for me is honors her legacy, because I wouldn't be doing those drawings if she hadn't been who she was and hadn't died. Therefore, for me, that's also a way that I'm sort of making something of this and making something positive of it. So I think that's probably, does that answer?
Yeah, absolutely, 100% it does, because it's different for us all, isn't it? And
yeah,
I think it's individual for us all in how we do that, and that's your way of doing it, which I think is I'm
lucky I've got this facility for drawing and for communication, which is what I do. It's been my job, so I'm lucky that I could channel it into that, and that gives me a shop window, if you like, that other people may not have. And I'm very fortunate that I can be this sort of poster boy for the process, and I am so grateful that I get that opportunity, because it feels good to help. When you see the pain, you felt the pain, anything you can do to just make it a little bit better for other people is great. So I think that's sort of my
That's lovely. That's really lovely. And how are the children doing? I know, solo parenting is like the hardest thing in the world. And I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, don't we, when our partners die. And I just loved the fact that you had that really honest conversation with your children that kind of went, it's different. It's going to be different. And we've got to work together as a team. I think, I wish I'd had that conversation. I think it's happened naturally, actually. But I think I was very much in denial at the beginning about, nothing's going to change. We're going to stay the same, and I'm going to stay the same, and it's going to be all right. Of course it wasn't.
And we're not. We're fundamentally changed as people, aren't we? I mean, it does.
100%. Yeah.
I've often said if they walked back in the room now, they wouldn't really recognise us as the same person. We are very different people.
Totally different. It's mad that the change it has on us. But I think how you have parented as a solo parent again has just been hugely inspiring. I think that principle of being honest and open and having conversations, you've applied that to your parenting as well, haven't you? From
I've tried, and I mean, God, I'm sure I make plenty of mistakes. I'm sure if you ask my kids the questions, you get a very different answer to what you get. but they're doing okay. I mean, my daughter's always been an old soul in a young body, and she's done very well, and her response was to sort of get very focused about things like work and all that. She's a teenager now, she's 14, so you're getting that kind of bit with her, but it's fine too, because even with that she's quite delightful in her own way. I mean, she's blooming irritating as well, but it's that's their job, isn't it?
Half of the course.
But she's great and works really hard. Ben was very young. He was only 7 when she died. I mean, he's now 11, and he is now sort of starting to maybe feel it that little bit more. I think that realization, and I've just recently found with him, there's a few little things where he's not like he was, they're behavioral. Again, he's a tweenager. He's getting there as well. He's at secondary now. So how much of it is just that and how much of it is the other, I don't know. But I know that he is, and has said to me a couple of times recently, that he's been missing her a bit more, and he feels it a bit, and it's possibly feeding into a couple of little things with him, and his focus isn't perhaps as well as it should. But then it's boys thing. A lot of boys' focus at that age isn't particularly good. So that it's a bit of a sort of Apollo 13 with him. I think it's like he's that point in life and that amount after her dying, that it's all kind of coming together. Don't get me wrong, he's still lovely, and he's not like difficult or trouble. It's just I'm having to be now slightly more aware that the kid gloves are having to go on a little bit more now, and I've got to bite my tongue a bit sometimes, so we don't get into sort of little rows about stuff, you know, because the fuse is shorter than it was a little while ago and all that sort of thing. So
how have you kind of reassured yourself through the process that you're doing okay, that you're enough on your own, that you can do this? Because although it's difficult, isn't it? And
I don't know if I ever have it. I think I'm still questioning myself every day. Am I doing all right? You know, and I keep looking every time they do a little thing that isn't, in inverted commas, right. I think, what have I done wrong to make them do that? But I think all parents do that all the time, even when there's two of them. I don't know, because I haven't got that experience now. I don't know what's this and what's normal. All I know is this is my normal. So but I'm kind of I constantly question myself, am I doing the right thing? And then I have to look at it and go, well, let's look fundamentally at what their behavior is, and you know, what can I do differently to improve it for them? How much freedom should I give them, and how strict should I be? And am I being too free? Am I being too strict? And I don't know. I think if there was a magic wand, you know, and everyone says has a different standard of what's right and wrong, and too much or too little. So again, I'm just following the gut and hoping for the best. And as long as I don't get arrested, I'm probably doing okay. You know?
That'll make an interesting doodle. I think you know, it's hard, and I think that's a really valid point. Actually, even, you know, if our partners were still here, we'd probably still be questioning ourselves, like, are we doing it right? Are we doing enough?
And I think the difference is, you'd be sitting there when they've gone to bed, saying to each other, should we do this? Should we do that? What do we think about that? Do we? But now you're saying that in your own head, like Gollum and Smeagol. You know, you're sitting there going, are we doing breakfast? No, we're not precious. And it's just like, so, oh dear.
It's exhausting.
Yeah, it is.
They didn't, I don't know whether this changed, but I know early on listening to you talk that they didn't have any bereavement support from a charity or anything.
No, they were offered it, and I was offered it, and I offered it to them, and they chose not to. They said, we'd rather talk with you, we'd rather blah blah blah, and that was fine. I did say recently to my son, I said, look, I'm doing what I can. Are you feeling you do need to talk? You know, because when he said he was missing or whatever, I said, do you want to talk to somebody? Because you can if you want. There's never a time. It's never like past its sell by.
Yes.
If you want to. And he was like, no. I said, well, look, let me know if you do. All right, and I'm happy to set it up. And he's like, okay, no, I'm fine. So he's still choosing not to, but the offer's still there. But no, they chose just to talk to each other and me and friends and whatever, because we talk. And I think a lot of people with counselling opens up when they find it hard to talk, but we never found it hard to talk. So I think, you know, we sort of counselled ourselves in that same way. But yeah, I've always said to both of them, look, if you have it now, or when you're mid-teen, or when you're in your 20s or 30s, I mean, have it when you need it. And it's not I'm against it. I've just felt I've not needed it, and personally, because I have my drawing, and they felt they didn't need it for whatever reasons. So, you know, but if they want it, it's there.
Exactly. And again, it's giving them that choice, isn't it? It's helping them sort of make those decisions. But I mean, you have the drawing. Do they draw? Do they write? Do they have an outlet?
Lily did a lot of poetry and stuff early on, and she does draw as well, but her drawing isn't grief-based drawing, it's just drawing. It's a creative outlet, but she doesn't sort of use it for grief. For her, there was a bit of writing. With Ben, there was a bit of drawing. I know he is quite good at drawing, but not in the same way as us. But he's very creative. He's got a vivid imagination, and a lot of his mechanism was through comedy. He just it was funny, and just by being weird and being crazy and quirky, that was his kind of way of channeling, I think.
Lovely.
And possibly hiding a bit, I think, maybe, but you know, maybe he's coming through that. Maybe that's what's happening at the moment, is that that's running out a bit, and he's maybe just coming to terms with the reality of it a bit more now, but that's fine.
Do you think they get comfort from your, I mean, do they follow you on social media, or do they just see what you
Lily
write
does.
on the...
I mean, Ben doesn't have the apps that she's got, but she does, and she does follow.
And do you think that helps guide them, brings them some comfort?
I hope so, yeah. I mean, they look at the drawings, both of them. They know what's been posted, and they'll often, something will happen in the day, and then they'll say, "Go, that's going to be the doodle, isn't it?" And I go, no. So I think they do, yeah. They quite like it, and it's quite funny when they always quite like it if we're out and about somewhere and somebody stops us and goes, "Sorry, are you Gary Scribbler? And we get recognized from the doodles.
Lovely.
Which has happened a few times out and about in strange places, and they kind of find that quite extra, you know, they're just like, blimey, that's weird, you know. So that's
strange,
quite funny,
isn't it?
yeah,
I mean, and they just must love the book that you, I mean, I've got the book. I love this book is incredible. You know, it just tells such a beautiful story, a tragic yet heartwarming story. And you know, and it's what's lovely about it is you can pick it up and you know, you just go to the pages and you've got like your doodles in there and a message, or even there's no words but just the picture. You know, if you guys sat by the tree,
I think it's sort of book you can open it up and just look at the page and then close it, and you'll get each one stands on its own. But also, if you read through in sequence, there is a journey that you can follow, and it's a love story. It's a love story. It's a love story that continued after she died, but it is still a love story.
It's
and I think that's, as we were putting the book together, that's what became clear to me. I didn't even realize it when we started it, but that's what it was, you know. And that was kind of, I mean, my editor Abigail at John Murray's was incredible, and she sort of kind of almost pointed that out to me as we were putting it together, that what it was, and she was right, you know. And I was like, oh yeah, well, that's clever. And
it is clever, and I just think everyone who loses a life partner should just be given this book.
Yeah, we've talked to a couple of charities. A couple of charities are sort of trying to get copies, but they ran out at the publishers at the moment because there aren't quite enough pre-orders. There's no more print runs coming up, but if we get loads of people asking, they'll do another print run. But you know,
because and I think because when you're grieving, I mean, I was given quite a few books when Simon died, and you opened the first page and you're like, oh my god, like I can't read that, I can't take in anything. And what's beautiful about this is that you know, like in the depths of your despair, you could make sense of this book and it would give you some hope in a very dark place. And it's that the simplicity of it makes it so beautiful.
Yeah, a lot of people said I started looking at it and I just went through in one sitting, and that's kind of nice. You can, it's not something that you have to sit beside your bed for a week and a half and plow through. It is something you can like with a nice big cup of coffee, you can go through the whole book, you know. Even though it's, you know, nearly a couple of hundred pages, but because it's drawings and little bits of writing, you can get through quickly.
And what a lovely legacy finding.
Oh, I mean, gosh,
the name, it just all fits, doesn't it?
Oh, I know, she couldn't have been named better, could she? Yeah. And they did such a beautiful job with the actual physical book. I mean, I have to say they were brilliant publishers, and it's just a physically lovely. I mean, just even if it was about something completely different, it'd be I love the book. If it wasn't mine, I'd have it because I just love the feel of it and the touch of it. You know, it's just a nice.
It is, thing. And what I love is that the paper beautifully kind of reflects the paper that you draw on.
The brown paper, and the measurements are the same as the sketchbooks I draw in, so all the drawings are actually life size. They're
oh my god, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's basically exactly like holding the sketchbooks. That's the thing, it's the same size as the books.
It really, I mean, you clearly are very talented, aren't you, with your drawing?
Well, it's a bloody good job because I can't do anything else, so
I don't know, Gary, I think you're doing all right.
It's paid the bills over the years, so that's quite handy.
Bless you. So I guess like you're now in this chapter of your life, you know, you've recently kind of announced that you have met the lovely Lisa. I don't know Lisa, but she just looks lovely in a couple of pictures that you've shared. She just has the most gorgeous smile. She's, you know, you look at her picture and you're like, oh, I want to meet her.
yeah, she has that effect on people.
Really just warm and lovely, and you do both look so happy together, and you've recently got engaged. How has sort of navigating new love been for you alongside your grief?
It was taking a step outside myself was fascinating, because you know, in the early days you think, well, this isn't, you know, that's it, I'm done, there's not gonna be anything else like that. You know, you hope that you might find somebody you can be with, that you'll get to be friends, that you can be together, and that things will develop and blah 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 blah, blah or whatever. But you think, right, I've had my big love, we're done, like that, it's not going to happen. And then through the power of social media, we met through Instagram basically, and started chatting, and it was one of those things that we just connected so quickly. And I mean, we were in love in next to no time just through chatting. We knew it even before we'd physically met, because it was lockdown. We already knew we were in love, sort of thing, which was quite I just didn't think that could happen, you know. I was kind of a little bit sort of cynical about that kind of thing when you see it, and then it happened to me, so I was like, oh, okay. It does happen, and it was unexpected, and again, surreal, that word. But and I before it happened, I couldn't work out what it would be like and how it works, because I still love Joy, I still love her, and it was like, you go, well, how does that work? And then I had that kind of road to Damascus realization that it was like having my children. And when we had Lily, we completely fell in love with this little pink squealy person. And you think, wow, that's amazing. And then a couple of years later, she got pregnant again, and the tummy was growing, and you're thinking, so what happens now? There's another one coming. Am I supposed to go, right, so half of that's now got to go to this one? And you know, you know, idiot. Yeah. But you think, how does this work? And then he was born, and suddenly it's like this door opened and a whole new load of love you didn't know was there came out, went bloomp. And you didn't stop loving child number one because there was child number two. Suddenly you had double the amount, and you did it. And it was exactly the same sensation. It was like when I fell in love with Lisa, these other doors opened up and this huge new thing came out, went ta-da. It's the love demon, and you know, and came out and went, I'm here. And it was like, oh, I get it. I you know,
yeah.
And that's kind of what happened. And the great thing is she gets that too.
That's lovely.
So, which is really important.
Yeah.
And has been so incredibly understanding, supportive, and indeed encouraging in that whole feeling of still loving Joy. That, I mean, that's one of the many reasons that makes her an incredibly special person. And yeah, so it was that realization that, oh, you can actually love someone else, because your love hasn't gone away, but it's like having two kids. Yeah. You can feel that love again. So that's, once I realized that, I could just chill out and just enjoy myself and go, yeah, okay, I can actually enjoy being in love, and there is no guilt, and there is anything like that, and yeah, and again, sharing that with the kids, saying, you know, you realize that just because I'm this much in love with Lisa, I haven't stopped loving Mum. It doesn't replace her, you know, and they get that as well. So that's been
that's lovely. And it sounds like, yeah, you've navigated that so well, because that's not an easy journey to travel, is it? And I'm sure it wasn't quite as simple.
Well, when you're falling at the beginning, you do get those complex, you know, oh my God, am I being unfaithful? I feel like I'm being unfaithful to the memory. And you get, oh, no. But then it was that kind of duh moment when you go, do you remember when you had the second child? And your brain suddenly goes, oh yeah, of course. And once I allowed myself to realize that, then you just go, and I'm in. Yes. I'm okay. Let's open all the doors. Let's get down all the remaining barriers, and let's just, yeah.
And has it made you kind of go, do you know what? I'm not messing around. I'm just going to grab this with both hands.
That was exactly it. You know, it had been a year and a bit when I proposed, and you know, it was 6 years before I proposed to Joy, I think it was, you know. But during that time, we were setting up a house, we were paying off debts, we were finding the right place to live, we were setting up her career, we were doing so many things. And once we got to the point where, it's like, should we get married? You know, and but with Lisa, it was like, you know what? I'm not. Oh, sorry, go away. Should have switched that off. I thought, I'm not getting any younger, and I know exactly how I feel. I'm a grown-up. I know what these feelings are. Life is fleeting and precious, and I don't want to waste a single moment of it. Yeah. And that's why I just decided, let's just jump in. And thankfully, she said
she's on board.
She's on board, and it's wonderful. So yeah, thank you. It is
wonderful, and I think it does take somebody incredibly special to date a widower, because I think it's complex, and I think it's hard to understand that you're with someone that still loves someone else, as much as that person isn't around anymore. It's respecting that grief, that loss, but also the love that is still there, and the fact that effectively she's inviting Joy into her life as well, isn't she? Because Joy is still a huge part of yours and the kids' life. So it's, you have to embrace it all. It's not
Yeah.
just you, it's everything that comes with you.
And I am the sum of some of those memories and those experiences, and you know, I am who I am because of all that, and accepting that and understanding that and not wanting to change that, but go with that. And that's, it does, it's you know, it's to be admired and
very much so.
You know, it's incredible.
I always said from the beginning, I don't think I'd want to do it, because I think it'd be really hard. And it's that feeling, isn't it, of having to, and you don't have to, but I think when you're dating the widow, the widower, that there's that sense of you've got to step into somebody else's shoes. You've got to kind of replace them almost, or you're never going to be able to live up to them and their memory.
And I think
you're never going to be good enough
to not even think, you know, I mean, I've always said that not trying to being their own person, being different. And certainly from my point of view, I wouldn't want to try and find a carbon copy. I mean, what's the point? It would never be quite the same. It would never. So falling in love with somebody different. I mean, the similarity they both have is they're both incredibly kind. They both had smiling eyes. They both were the sort of person that loves a good laugh and were just lovely people. Yeah. But as people, they're very, very different. And that in itself is I think, you know, is great, and how it should be. I think if you find yourself a carbon copy, that's just a little bit kind of, for me, I would find that a bit weird. I mean, other people may want that, but for me, I couldn't have done that, because nobody could be her. And I wouldn't want them to be her. And I wouldn't want them to even pretend to be her. And having someone who is so different in so many ways is actually, it's new things for me to learn and discover. I'm never measuring her going, oh, Joy wouldn't do that, because she's not Joy. You know, it's like, oh, I love that. That's a new thing to me. And I love that.
And of course, you're so different now, you know. So, and when you met Joy, you know, you were looking for somebody for different reasons and different qualities, and now you're older and you've been through life, and kind of, all of those things have shaped who you are now. It's kind of like, okay, I kind of maybe looking for different things strike you, and I think that's the beauty of it. What do you think for you, you know, because I always talk about my loss with Simon, and how I feel I have changed as a result of it. What positive kind of I don't know, changes, I suppose, it has brought to my life, to me, to my outlook, my perspective, what it's taught me. What do you feel you've learned from it, that it's brought to your life, not taken away from you?
It's freed up a lot of emotions that I was quite happy not to show. I would never cry at a film. I would never, you know, I was quite happy just to sort of sit there with a slightly smug grin on my face about most things. And now I feel things a lot deeper. I feel emotions, both in all directions, a lot more. It's certainly sort of released something in that department, which I think is wonderful and healthy. It's made me so much more aware of just how precious life is, the world is, and as we touched on just now, you know, wanting to make the most of every moment. It kind of cemented my spirituality, that I believe, you know, I'm very much I'm sort of neo-pagan, crazy old hippie. So I mean, but a tree hugging nutter. But I nature is what I kind of live by and worship, the wheel of the year, the circle of life, all that sort of stuff. And although I liked all that sort of thing, it made me so much more solid in that being where I'm at, and getting a lot of comfort from the fact we are part of something a lot bigger and ongoing. It's all done that. It's made me, and I'm a better person in practical terms. I'm better at, you know, I can cook now, and I love cooking. I cook and I clean and I do things that I used to think were like magic that she used to do, that I used to sort of had to be told to do because I was useless. That now I do automatically. So I guess it's just made me better in that. It's, I think weirdly, the overall thing coming away from it has been overwhelmingly positive. Which is a very strange thing to take away from something so awful, is that you actually end up kind of better because of it. And it's hard to admit sometimes that as well. You want to say, you know, your sort of melodramatic instinct will say, no, I'm broken, I can't. But actually, it's made so many things stronger and clearer through the grief and through the pain, has made me realize what's important. And I guess that is a positive thing. So yeah, I think that's what I've taken from it.
Yeah, and that's, you know, that's such a powerful message, isn't it? Because, you know, it is tragic, yet it's also transformative, and it can be excuse me, it can be incredibly positive. And you know, I wish I could have learnt all the lessons I've learnt in a different way, but we can't. You know, these things happen, and we can't change that.
It takes trauma sometimes to actually create these changes. You can imagine it as much as you like, but when you actually have the trauma, it's going to affect you in certain ways. And you know, if you can pull something positive from trauma, then you know that's
yeah. It's I think it's opening your heart and your mind to the possibility of that. And I think at the beginning, sometimes you're not ready to hear it, you're not ready to see those lessons maybe, or what good can come of it, which absolutely, I think if somebody said to me in the early days, you know, you're going to learn so much and you're going to grow, and I probably would have punched them in the face.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know, as you go through the path and your mind opens, and you experience new ways and new ideas, it opens up so much, and I think you view the world in a very different way. And relationships, you know, you lose some relationships, absolutely, they can be affected, but I think also there's a lot of strength that comes in relationships as well, and especially with my children.
Yeah, relationship with my children is very different to what it was. My friends, there's a lovely relationship with my friends there now. I'm lucky I haven't lost many, I don't think, but I mean, some of my deepest relationships are fairly new ones that I've made with fellow members of the tribe,
yes,
who just get it in ways that the muggles can't, you know, as we say, you know.
Yeah.
And not to disparage them at all, in anyone else who's not been through it, because people have been incredibly supportive, but there's something so fundamental that you feel that only someone else has been through it totally gets. And a couple of them have become my closest friends, you know. And but yeah, it's been quite a journey. Well, it's not over. The journey's never going to finish, you know. That's the thing, it's ongoing, and will continue.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like another, people say, don't know, the next chapter. I'm like, this feels like a completely different book.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, part two. It is definitely that. I've often felt that with it. And like a book, you know, the other pages are still there in your left hand. You can still flip back through them if you want to, but you're in this new section, this new book, this new whatever.
Yeah.
And that is another one that I've talked about in the past. Yeah, definitely that sort of analogy.
Yeah, it's very true. What would you go back and say to your kind of fresh, raw widower self, that maybe you know, you didn't know at the time or couldn't see at the time, that you think would have helped you?
I mean, to be honest, it's probably crass and obvious, but I would like to say to me, this will pass. It will feel better. Don't beat yourself up, you know, about things. Everything you're feeling is normal, and things will feel better. I think, you know, and don't expect it to happen straight away. You know, just be kind to yourself. I think that's kind of probably the message I'd give to me. Yeah.
And I think you have, I'm sure there's been times when you haven't, but I think you really have done that so very well, so very instinctively. And I think that message in itself is powerful for people, you know, and I'm always saying this, like, you know how to do this, you know how to find your way again. It's just learning to listen, I suppose, and tune in to yourself.
Listen to what your deep down feelings, and you know, don't be fooled by what's happening on the surface. Inside there's other stuff going on, you know, on subroutine inside that's looking after you, and you know, you'll get there. Yeah,
you will, absolutely, 100%. So where can, obviously, your book Finding Joy, the people can find this on Amazon, is where I found it.
That's the main place. I mean, if you can get it through your local independent bookshop, please do.
Yes.
There are still copies out there. Yes, please, that's lovely, thank you. Apart from that, if you look on Instagram or Twitter, you've got Gary Scribbler on both of those. I'm on Facebook as well, but it's exactly the same stuff. So Instagram is probably sort of my my favorite place to sort of do stuff, because it's very picture based, you know, and generally a kind of quite a lovely place. Twitter, nice. You know, you have to ignore all the other stuff on there, but my Twitter's always been lovely, which is nice. You know, the people have been lovely to me. I mean, you know, not my Twitter. I'm not saying I'm lovely. I'm saying people have been lovely to me on there, unlike they are to some other people. But but Instagram is yeah, they're all good. So that's where you can find me, Gary Scribbler. Yeah, that's it really.
Because you do some I've seen that you do some workshops every now and then, don't you, for people?
Do. In fact, I'm doing some. I'm starting in a couple of weeks' time with a company called Bravo 22, which is veterans company. You know, people that have been you know, veterans from the forces that have been come out for various sort of reasons or whatever, whether physical, psychological, whatever, and they have all these workshops, and I'm doing some stuff with them, which is fantastic. I've done quite a few with them, and they're wonderful to work with. I've done a lot of stuff with the Good Grief Festival as well. Done workshops on using doodling as a means of self-counseling and stuff, and anything like that comes up, I'll always publicize it on the old socials. So any new workshops that come up, I'll let people know. And just occasionally I decide to do one off my own bat and do a Facebook Live or something about drawing. So I think last one of those was Boxing Day.
I think you did Boxing Day, didn't you? Yeah.
It was, yeah. That's become my Boxing Day thing now. I'm going to do that every Boxing Day, because Boxing Day is such a flat day, isn't it? You've had Christmas, and then you're all sitting there just full of turkey and feeling a bit, and there's rubbish on the telly. I thought, well, if I just jump on for a couple of hours and do some stupid drawing, if it makes 2 or 3 people happy, that's going to be fun. So, so yeah, a bit of that. So yeah, I mean, basically, if you follow the socials, then anything else that's happening that might be of interest will crop up.
Yes, brilliant. I think, you know, like I say, Gary, what you do, I think it normalizes for people what they're going through, because grief is very isolating and very scary, and we don't understand what's going on for us a lot of the time. And I think you very beautifully have illustrated over the years that, you know, what people are feeling, what they're going through. You're not alone.
Normal. You're not if alone. Anyone listening to this, if you're feeling alone, you're not. Honestly, we've all, somewhere out there, one of us has felt what you're feeling right now.
Yeah,
trust me. Yeah,
that's it. It's so important. Gary, thank you so much. It's been such a wonderful conversation as always. I really appreciate your time. Bless you.
Thank you.
See you again soon.
Bye.
Cheers, Gary.